The chandelier above me shimmered like frozen rain, every droplet of crystal catching the light and scattering it back in colors too bright to look at for long. The hall was filled with laughter, the kind that doesn't sound real, the kind people rehearse in front of mirrors before they learn to use it as armor. Music floated from the quartet near the bar, smooth and expensive, each note wrapped in velvet. Everything was perfect. Everything was curated. And then there was me. I stood near the end of the service corridor, straightening a crooked napkin on one of the tables. My reflection shimmered faintly on the polished surface. For a second, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. The black dress uniform, the tied-up hair, the polite smile that had become a habit more than a choice. No one knew that the person fixing the table owned the hotel. I had built the Rowan house from nothing. 10 years of saving, of late-night calls to suppliers, of washing sheets when the staff didn't show up. 10 years of missing holidays, skipping sleep, drinking coffee for dinner. It was supposed to be my monument to independence, a place that finally proved I didn't need anyone's permission to exist. And yet that night I was invisible inside it. Across the hall, a crowd had gathered around a woman standing beneath a cascade of white orchids. Elise, my sister. Her laughter was the center of gravity for every camera and every compliment. Her hair fell in perfect golden waves. Her champagne dress clung like it had been poured onto her skin. People adored her without even trying to know her. She raised her glass high, eyes glowing with the confidence of someone who had never built anything but always arrived to claim it. "To family," she said. The crowd cheered. Glasses clinked. I stayed behind the column, watching. Then her gaze shifted and she saw me. It happened in an instant, the smile, the flicker of recognition, the deliberate pause that stretched just long enough for the people around her to follow her eyes. Her lips curved again, this time sharper. "Who let the staff stand here dressed like that?" she said loudly, her voice cutting through the music. "She's ruining the mood." Laughter rippled through the room. The sound of it struck like cold water. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. She kept going. "Seriously, darling, tell your manager to keep standards. This is a luxury venue, not a shelter." The air thinned. Someone near me muttered awkwardly. The event manager, Andrew, appeared at my side, face pale. "Ms. Weaver, I cut him off gently. "It's fine." He looked at me, unsure if I meant it. His eyes flicked toward Elise, then back at me, full of silent apology. I placed the last napkin on the table and stepped back. Let them enjoy their night. I walked toward the exit while the laughter continued behind me. My heels clicked softly against the marble floor, every step measured, controlled, the way I taught myself to move when emotion threatened to spill over. The night air hit me like a release. Outside, the city of Edinburgh glittered beyond the glass doors, its lights trembling on the surface of the harbor. I breathed in the scent of salt and rain. The sound of the celebration faded into a dull hum, replaced by the quiet whistle of wind moving through the flagpoles on the roof. I sat on the stone railing beside the fountain. The water shimmered with reflections of gold and white from the ballroom above. From here, the hotel looked like something alive, a creature with 1,000 eyes, all watching, all pretending not to see me. I had never felt smaller in a place I built with my own hands. My phone buzzed. A message lit up the screen. "Mother, Elise looked beautiful tonight. You should have joined her at the table. Family means forgiveness." I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I locked the screen and slipped the phone into my bag. The wind brushed against my face. It smelled clean, like beginnings and endings all at once. The next morning, I was at the hotel before sunrise. Old habit. The lobby smelled of lilies and polish. The cleaners nodded when I passed, and I nodded back. None of them said anything about last night, though I could feel the weight of it in their silence. I walked through each hallway like a ghost checking her own ruins. The ballroom was empty now. Tables half cleared, champagne glasses tilted, the floor scattered with petals from the orchids that had wilted overnight. The sound system was still humming softly, like it hadn't realized the show was over. I turned it off. The silence that followed was almost kind. When I reached my office, Grace was already there. She was sipping coffee, eyes focused on her tablet. Grace had been with me for 6 years, efficient, calm, the kind of person who knew when to speak and when not to. She looked up when I entered. "Morning, Ms. Weaver." "Morning, Grace. You didn't sleep?" "Not much." She hesitated, then said, "There are 3 missed calls from your mother and 1 from Elise." I sat down behind my desk. "Ignore them for now," Grace nodded. She didn't ask questions, that's why I trusted her. For a while, the only sound was the tapping of her fingers on the screen. Then she said quietly, "People online are talking about the party. It's all over social media." I looked at her. "What kind of talking?" She turned the tablet toward me. Dozens of photos and clips flooded the screen, Elise surrounded by guests, Elise laughing under the chandelier, Elise raising her glass with captions that read, "Queen of the Night, the most elegant celebration of the year." And there, in one frame, blurry but unmistakable, was me, in the background, standing by a table like a servant. The caption under that one said, "Every palace needs its staff." For a long time, I said nothing. The light from the screen burned against my eyes. Then I whispered, "Save all of it." Grace blinked. "Save it?" "Yes, every post, every video, every tag." She nodded slowly, understanding something in my tone. By noon, I received a call. The screen said Elise. I let it ring twice before picking up. "Morning, sis," her voice chirped through the line, sweet and careless. "How's my favorite hotel owner? I suppose that depends on what you're calling about." "Come on, don't be like that. Last night was amazing." Everyone loved it. The event planner said the setup was flawless. You should be proud. I didn't authorize it. A pause. "Oh, don't start with that. You own the place. Why act like a stranger?" "Because I wasn't invited." She laughed softly. "You're always invited, you just never show up the right way." "The right way? You know what I mean. Loosen up a little. It's your hotel, not a monastery." I leaned back in my chair. "What do you want, Elise?" "Well," her voice shifted, casual but calculated. "There's a small issue with the payments. The planner said some invoices are still open, and they put your name as the guarantor since it's your property. I told them you'd take care of it." I closed my eyes. "How much?" "Just a few things. The floral fountain, the fireworks, the designer." "How much?" She hesitated. "About 75,000, give or take." I laughed once. It sounded nothing like amusement. "Give or take." "Zayla, don't make this complicated. You can write it off as marketing." People were posting about the venue all night. That's exposure. "Exposure," I repeated softly. "Interesting word. You humiliate me in front of strangers, use my property without permission, and now you call that exposure." "Oh, come on, you're being dramatic. You think anyone noticed?" "Everyone knows I joke like that. You're too sensitive." I looked out the window. The city stretched beneath the clouds, calm and distant. "Maybe," I said, "or maybe I'm finally done mistaking cruelty for humor." She went silent for a moment. Then, in a colder tone, "You've changed, you know. Ever since you got money, you think you're above us." I smiled to myself. Funny, I was thinking the opposite. Before she could reply, I ended the call. That evening, I stayed at the hotel long after everyone left. The staff lights dimmed one by one. The hum of the elevator was the only sound left. I poured myself a cup of coffee and walked to the rooftop terrace. From up there, the harbor lights looked like floating embers on black water. The wind was sharp, carrying the faint scent of salt and something metallic. I leaned against the railing, eyes tracing the reflection of the city below. My phone vibrated again, another message. "Mother, your sister feels awful. You embarrassed her by walking out. Can't you be the bigger person for once?" I typed a reply, then erased it. Typed again, erased again. Finally, I wrote, "Being the bigger person doesn't mean being the doormat." Then I deleted that too because it didn't matter. The truth was simpler. They would never see what they didn't want to see. When I got home, the silence was heavy but not unpleasant. I switched on the small lamp near the window. Its yellow light spread across the room, touching the bookshelves, the small potted fern I kept forgetting to water, the photo frame lying face down on the desk. I turned it over. A younger version of me smiled back, arm around Elise, both of us holding melting ice cream cones. We looked inseparable back then. Sisters, not opponents. I remembered the day that picture was taken. It was the summer after our father remarried. I was 15, she was 10. She had dropped her cone and started crying. I'd given her mine without thinking. She smiled through the tears, said, "You're the best sister in the world." I believed her. Now, 20 years later, that sentence felt like a line from a story I had outgrown. I placed the frame upright again, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe some memories deserve to stand, even when they stop meaning what they used to. I sat at the table, opened my laptop, and stared at the screen until the cursor blinked like a heartbeat. Then I started writing. Not a message, not a complaint. A list. 1. Did they ever love me or just what I could give? 2. If I lost everything, who would still stay? I didn't have answers yet, but for the first time I wanted to find out. The next morning, before the hotel opened, I sent a short email to my lawyer. Subject, urgent asset review. Message, I want a full audit. Make sure no one has signature authority on my behalf. Immediate action required. I read it twice before pressing send. When I did, something inside me unclenched. This wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. I made coffee and watched the steam curl toward the ceiling. Outside, the city was waking up. Inside, something in me was too. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to choose me. I had already chosen myself. The morning after the email, the air inside my office felt strangely different. Lighter. Maybe because I finally knew what to do. For years, I'd let emotions drive my choices, hoping kindness could soften people who only understood convenience. But this time, I was done waiting for a moral epiphany that was never coming. Grace came in holding 2 coffees. She placed one on my desk without asking if I wanted it. She had learned my rhythms. "You've got a visitor," she said. "Who?" She hesitated. "Your mother." For a second, I thought I misheard her. "Here?" "She's downstairs," said it's important. The last time my mother came here was the grand opening 5 years ago, when she posed for photos beside me like a proud parent accepting an award. Since then, silence. "Send her up," I said. Grace gave me a look that asked, "Are you sure?" I nodded. When the elevator doors opened, the scent of expensive perfume filled the room before she even stepped out. She walked in wearing a beige coat, her makeup flawless, her heels sharp enough to stab through marble. She smiled the kind of smile she used to give strangers at church events. "Zayla, darling, you look tired. Are you sleeping?" "I'm managing," I said, standing. "What brings you here?" She reached into her purse and pulled out a cream envelope. "I thought we should settle some confusion before it escalates." She placed it gently on the table between us. "It's about Elise's celebration." "I'm not surprised," I said. She ignored the sarcasm. "Event planner said there's been a misunderstanding with payments. I told them you'd never refuse family, but they do need confirmation in writing, just a formality." I opened the envelope. Inside were 3 color-printed pages, invoices, budgets, a signature line. At the top, in looping font, it said Elise Weaver's 30th birthday celebration. My name appeared in bold under primary sponsor. Next to it, a pink highlighter mark said confirmed by Z. Weaver. I looked up. Confirmed by who? She adjusted the cuff of her sleeve. "They said your assistant sent an approval. It's probably just a mix-up." "My assistant didn't approve anything, and I didn't either." Her tone turned softer, coaxing. "Honey, it's just money. You'll make it back in a week. Elise can't afford this. Your father's retired. I'm not asking you to pay for strangers. It's your sister." I leaned back slowly, studying her face. "Do you hear yourself?" "What do you mean?" "You're calling it help." "But it's not help when I have no choice." Her eyes hardened a little, though the smile stayed. "Zayla, don't dramatize. You're the stable one. You've always been the reliable one. Everyone counts on you. You should be proud of that." I walked toward the window and stared at the harbor outside. Seagulls drifted above the water, their wings catching the gray morning light. "You've mistaken reliability for servitude," I said quietly. When I turned back, she was still smiling, though the corners of her mouth trembled slightly. "You've become so cold," she said. "Success has made you forget what family means." "No," I said, "I just finally understand what it never meant." I reached for the envelope, placed it back on the table, and slid it toward her. "I'm not signing this. If anyone contacts you about it, direct them to my lawyer." She blinked. "Lawyer?" "Yes, that's what people use when conversation stops working." She stood there for a moment, blinking as if she hadn't heard me properly. "Zayla, you don't mean that." I walked to the small fridge near the wall, opened it, and took out the box she'd brought. Banana bread, my favorite when I was 12. I opened the freezer and placed it inside. She frowned. "What are you doing?" "Keeping it where things that numb people belong." I closed the freezer door and met her eyes. "Goodbye, Mom." She gathered her purse like a soldier gathering dignity after defeat. "You've turned into someone I don't recognize. Then maybe you never looked long enough." She left without another word. The smell of her perfume lingered after she was gone, faint and bitter like burnt sugar. Grace returned a few minutes later. She glanced at the envelope on the table. That looked tense. "It was overdue," I said. "File those documents under family fraud, label it one." Grace's brows lifted slightly, but she didn't ask. She simply nodded. "Understood." That afternoon, I created a new folder on my computer. Title: Weaver Family Evidence. Subfolders: Unauthorized Contracts, Public Defamation, Witness Accounts, Financial Records. For each document, I scanned and uploaded a copy. It felt surgical, methodical. Every click was a stitch closing an old wound. When I finished, I sat back and let the silence of the room press around me. There was no satisfaction, just stillness. The next day passed without a word from Elise or my mother. But the quiet felt like a storm crouching somewhere out of sight. By Wednesday, the waiting ended. Grace came in holding a thick manila envelope. "Express delivery," she said, "from Varity Planning Group." I looked at the sender label. "Chase Dalton, Elise's fiancé's assistant," Grace said. "They sent it marked personal and financial." I didn't open it right away. I just stared at the envelope. The weight of it felt heavier than paper. Grace set it down. "Should I leave you alone?" "No, stay." I broke the seal and pulled out the contents. A formal contract printed on gold-edged stationery. The logo at the top read Aria Sky Lounge, exclusive rooftop events. Each page was thick, expensive, perfumed faintly with something floral. I flipped to the 5th page. There it was, financial guarantor, Zayla Weaver. Signature required by November 3rd. Fine print below it. If the primary party fails to pay, the financial guarantor will assume full responsibility. I laughed once, a sound without humor. They didn't even bother asking. Grace leaned closer. Do you want me to shred it? No, file it, label it too. Financial abuse. She nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. For the rest of the day, I moved through my schedule like a machine. Meetings, calls, invoices, check-ins with staff. Every task done with precision, every smile measured. But beneath the surface, something inside me was changing shape. I wasn't the same woman who used to tremble when family demanded more. I wasn't the girl who believed that loyalty meant sacrifice. I was starting to see myself the way I saw my hotel, an empire that needed security protocols. That evening, I sent a short email to the legal team. Effective immediately, no third-party proposals or financial requests are to be accepted under my name unless verified in writing and approved personally by me. Any exceptions are to be reported to legal. I read it twice, then pressed send. Grace was locking up when I left the office. You good? She asked. Better than yesterday, she smiled faintly. You look like you just installed an alarm system around your soul. Maybe I did. The elevator doors closed, and her reflection disappeared as I descended to the lobby. Outside, the night had that strange quiet that comes after a heavy rain. The streetlights glowed like distant fires. My reflection followed me on every glass surface, tall, calm, untouchable. When I reached the parking lot, I stopped for a moment, staring at the building. From the outside, the Rowan house looked flawless, all glass and gold. But I knew every imperfection inside it. The tiny crack on the 3rd column, the uneven tile in the west corridor, the mirror in the ballroom that reflected people too beautifully to be honest. Maybe that was what my life had been too, a house of mirrors. Every reflection perfect until you stood close enough to see the fracture lines. I drove home in silence. The city lights blurred past, turning into streaks of white and amber against the windshield. At a red light, I caught my reflection again in the side mirror. My eyes looked different, steadier. When I arrived home, the apartment smelled faintly of lavender and paper. I made tea and opened my laptop. Elise's name appeared at the top of the unread messages. I clicked it. Her email was short. Hey sis, hope you're not still mad. I found this amazing venue in London for the after party. The deposit deadline, next week. I'll CC Mom so she can forward you the details. Love you. No apology, no acknowledgement, just assumption dressed as affection. I read it 3 times, then dragged it into the new folder. Subfolder, Emotional Manipulation. File name, Phase 1. I closed the laptop. The room went dark except for the thin line of moonlight slipping through the blinds. I leaned back, listening to the city breathing beyond the windows. Cars, distant voices, the heartbeat of a place that didn't care who you were. I thought about Elise's smile, my mother's perfume, the endless cycle of guilt disguised as love. For years, I'd lived under their gravity, pulled in every direction but my own. Not anymore. I took a deep breath, steady and quiet. The tea had gone cold, but I drank it anyway. It tasted bitter, grounding. In the reflection of the window, I saw myself clearly for the first time in years. Not the daughter, not the sister, not the provider. Just a woman reclaiming her name from people who used it like currency. I whispered, I see you. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the glass, and somewhere below, a light flickered out. I smiled, because for the first time, I knew which lights I would never relight again. And that was the night I stopped being theirs. That was the night I became mine. The rain began just before sunset, soft and indecisive, the kind of drizzle that makes the city glisten without washing it clean. The streets of Edinburgh shimmered like oiled glass. Through the car window, I could see the reflections of passing headlights sliding across the puddles, doubling everything. 2 skies, 2 cities, 2 versions of every person. The invitation had arrived that morning. A text from my mother. Family dinner tonight, 7 p.m. Be there, we need to talk. No greeting, no question. Just an order shaped like tradition. I almost deleted it, but something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe the last fragment of obligation, decided to go. Grace raised her brows when I told her. Are you sure that's a good idea? I'm sure it's necessary. She sighed, handing me a folder. Then take this, documentation of the false contracts, just in case they try something. I smiled at her practicality. I'm going for dinner, not war. Same difference, she said. By the time I reached the old Weaver house on Linton Grove, the rain had turned to mist. The house looked exactly as it had when I was a teenager: red brick walls, white shutters, a porch light that buzzed faintly with insects. Only the oak tree in the yard was gone, replaced by a marble bench. It felt symbolic, roots replaced with something ornamental. The door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there in a pearl-colored sweater, smiling too tightly. "You came. That's good. We didn't know if you would." "I said I'd be here at 7. She stepped aside. "We're already at the table." Inside, the air was thick with the smell of roasted lamb and rosemary. The dining room looked staged, the good china out, candles lit, as if a camera crew might appear any minute to capture the illusion of domestic peace. My father sat at the far end of the table, glasses perched on his nose, pretending to read the newspaper even though the pages hadn't turned in 5 minutes. Elise sat across from him, wearing a green satin dress that caught the candlelight every time she moved. Her hair was styled in soft waves. She looked up when I entered, her expression a blend of boredom and performance. "Zayla, finally!" I took my seat without replying. The only sound was the clink of cutlery against porcelain. My mother cleared her throat. "Let's eat before the food gets cold." No one touched their plates for several seconds. Then Elise broke the silence. "Oh, I've been planning the London event. It's going to be bigger than the Edinburgh one, more media coverage, better sponsors. I've already talked to some people in the event scene. There's this rooftop at the Meridian Hotel with a view of the Thames. We could have a suspended champagne bar, live band, floral arch." She paused dramatically, then added, "It's not finalized yet, of course, depends on the budget." I kept my eyes on my fork. "Whose budget?" She smiled sweetly. "You'll see," I brought the proposal. My mother handed her a folder as if this had all been rehearsed. Elise slid it across the table toward me. The cover page had the words "Elise Weaver, Brand Image Expansion Project." I raised a brow. "Brand image expansion?" Elise nodded enthusiastically. "I've been thinking about building a stronger social presence. This event won't just be a party, it'll be a statement, a career move." I flipped through the pages. Each one was an explosion of gold fonts and photos of floral fountains and champagne pyramids. At the bottom, a number was circled in red: £92,000. "Ambitious," I said. "You think so? It's actually modest compared to what other influencers spend." "Influencers?" She leaned forward. "I told you I'm starting my own brand, Elise Weaver Lifestyle, travel, fashion, wellness. I'll collaborate with luxury venues, promote them online. If this party goes viral, you'll benefit too. Free publicity for the Rowan house." "Free publicity," I repeated softly, "meaning I pay for the event and you get the followers." My father finally looked up from the paper. "Zayla, let's not start an argument. Elise is just explaining." "She's not explaining, she's pitching." My mother sighed, placing her spoon down like a judge calling order. "You've always been too serious. Money is just a tool, dear. You can't take it with you." I looked at her across the candlelight. "You've used that sentence so many times it's lost meaning." "Zayla, no, let's be honest for once," I said quietly. "You don't call these family dinners unless there's a financial reason." Elise rolled her eyes. "God, you make it sound like we're scamming you." "Aren't you?" She laughed. "You're so dramatic. It's not scamming, it's collaboration. Collaboration usually involves consent." My father's tone turned soft, almost pleading. "We just thought you could help. You're in a good position. It wouldn't hurt to lend support. That's what families do." I looked at him, the man who once taught me how to ride a bike, the man who told me success meant freedom. Support doesn't mean silence when someone's being exploited. The word hung in the air like smoke. Elise's smile vanished. My mother's eyes hardened. "You're making a scene." "No," I said. "I'm finally describing it accurately." Elise pushed back her chair. "You know what? Forget it. I don't need your money. I'll find another sponsor." I almost believed her, but then she added, "You'll regret it when the hotel starts losing buzz. Social media drives business now. People want stories. I was giving you one." I stood. "I've lived enough stories written by someone else." The chair legs scraped the floor. I picked up my coat and walked toward the hallway. Behind me, I heard my mother's voice rise. "The more money you make, the colder you get?" I didn't turn around. The sound of my own footsteps was the only reply. Outside, the rain had started again, heavier this time. It soaked my coat within minutes, but I didn't care. The cold felt cleaner than anything inside that house. I walked down the street until their windows were just pinpoints of light behind me. When I reached my car, I leaned against the door, breathing hard. My reflection in the window looked blurred, almost unrecognizable. Maybe that was a good thing. I sat in the driver's seat and let the rain drum against the roof. For a moment, I thought about calling Grace just to talk to someone who existed in my world instead of theirs, But I didn't. Some silences are necessary. The next morning, the Rowan house was quieter than usual. Grace met me at the entrance holding a cup of black coffee and a hesitant expression. "You look like you wrestled with the weather," she said. "I wrestled with worse." She followed me to the elevator. "You went to the dinner, didn't you?" "Yes." "How bad?" "Imagine a charity gala where the charity doesn't know it's being donated." Grace winced. "Ouch." The elevator opened to the 5th floor. She hesitated before following me out. "They're not going to stop, people like that, they mistake kindness for permission." "I'm aware. So what now?" I smiled faintly. "Now I stop giving them permission." I spent the rest of the day buried in work. Meetings, maintenance checks, reviewing the new expansion proposals. But every now and then, my mind drifted back to the dinner table. The way Elise's voice filled the room, the way my mother's silence agreed with every unreasonable word. By afternoon, I received a message from Elise. "Sorry if last night was tense. Let's move past it. We're family. Also, the London venue needs confirmation by next week. I'll have them contact your office directly. XO." I stared at the message until the words blurred. Then I deleted it. That evening, I went up to the rooftop lounge. The sky was streaked with pink and gray, the horizon glowing faintly. I poured myself a glass of wine and leaned against the railing. Below, the city pulsed quietly. People rushing home, lights flickering on in windows, lives colliding and separating in rhythm. For a long time, I thought success would protect me, that being independent meant being untouchable. But it didn't. It just made the knives quieter. The elevator doors slid open behind me. Grace stepped out, carrying her tablet. "I figured I'd find you here. I like the quiet up here." She joined me at the railing. "There's something I think you should see." She handed me the tablet. On the screen was Elise's social media page, a new post. A photo of her in a white limousine, champagne in hand. The caption read, "When your sister owns a 5-star hotel but drives a 2012 car. Goals." The comments were already flooding in. Some laughed, some called me stingy. One said, "If I had her money, I'd live better." I handed the tablet back. "Save it, add it to the archive." Grace frowned. "You're really keeping records?" "Yes, for now." She studied me for a moment. "You're planning something?" "Preparation isn't planning," I said softly. "It's survival." The wind picked up, tugging at my hair. In the glass panels of the rooftop, I saw our reflections, 2 women standing side by side, one tired but unbroken, the other silently loyal. I raised my glass slightly toward the city below. "To family," I said quietly. "The best teachers in cruelty." Grace's voice was low but firm, "and the best motivation to never go back." I drank, the wine cold against my lips. For the first time, I didn't taste bitterness, only resolve. 2 days after the dinner, the hotel lobby filled with the muted sounds of early morning. Rain streaked down the windows like thin silver lines, distorting the world outside. I watched from my office as guests drifted through the revolving doors, umbrellas dripping onto the marble floor. Everyone seemed to have somewhere to go, everyone except me. The phone buzzed. Grace's voice came through the speaker. "There's a delivery for you, no sender listed. Bring it in." She appeared a moment later carrying a bouquet of white roses. "No card, just this." She handed me a sealed envelope tucked between the stems. The paper smelled faintly of perfume. I opened it. A note written in looping cursive, "Let's not fight anymore. Love, Elise." I stared at it for a long moment before tossing it into the trash. "Keep the flowers," I said. Grace hesitated. "They're probably from her." "I know." Later that afternoon, while I was reviewing guest invoices, Grace knocked again. "You might want to see this." She held up her tablet. Another social post. Elise again. This time she stood on a balcony overlooking the Thames, posing with a glass of champagne. The caption read, "Can't wait for next week's big announcement. London, get ready." I took a slow breath. "She's already started promoting it." Grace nodded. "She tagged the hotel's account in one of the comments. People are assuming you're sponsoring it." I felt my jaw tight. Respond with an official statement, neutral tone, something like the Rowan House operates independently and has no partnership with outside events unrelated to its internal operations. Keep it factual. "Got it," Grace said, already typing. I watched her fingers move quickly across the screen, her efficiency a small anchor in the chaos. "You know what I admire about you, Grace?" I asked. She glanced up. "That I bring you bad news with coffee? That, and you never assume my silence means weakness." She smiled faintly. "That's because I've seen what you do with silence." By evening, the rain had stopped, leaving behind a sky streaked with dark purple clouds. I walked through the empty corridors of the hotel, the sound of my heels echoing softly. In the ballroom, the scent of wax and lilies still lingered from the last event. I stopped in front of the grand mirror that covered the north wall. My reflection stared back, tired, calm, unyielding. For years, I had believed reflection was truth, but mirrors only show the surface. They don't reveal the hands shaking behind folded arms, the breath that catches before a smile. They don't show how much it hurts to be unseen. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my father. I let it ring twice before answering. "Zayla," he said, his voice careful, "your mother told me about the argument." "I wouldn't call it an argument, more like a performance I didn't audition for," he sighed. "You know how your mother and Elise are, they get carried away. It's not worth holding on to anger." "I'm not angry, Dad, I'm awake." "That's not the same thing." "It's close enough." He hesitated, then said, "They just want to keep the family close." "Close to what?" "To each other," I laughed softly. "Dad, proximity without respect isn't closeness, it's containment." He didn't reply for a while. I heard the faint sound of the television in the background, the hum of a life running on autopilot. Finally, he said, "You've always been strong-willed. Sometimes that strength builds walls. Maybe walls are better than open wounds." He exhaled, a long, weary sound. "You sound like you've already decided." "I have. I'm not funding Elise's fantasy. Not this time, not ever again. She'll be disappointed. She'll survive." When the call ended, I stood in the middle of the ballroom, staring at my reflection. Somewhere in that mirrored surface, I could almost see the younger version of myself, the one who still believed that being good was enough to be loved. I wanted to tell her it never was. The next morning, I found Grace waiting outside my office with a thick folder in her hands. "Legal just confirmed," she said. "No external contracts under your name, everything locked down." "Good. There's more," she added. "The Aria Sky Lounge sent another proposal, this time through your mother's email. They never learn." She placed the folder on my desk. "What do you want me to do?" "Add it to the file, label it 3. She smiled slightly. "You're starting to sound like a detective." "Maybe I am. It's time someone investigated my family." She sat down across from me. "You ever think about what you'd do if they stopped? If they finally left you alone?" I thought about it. The question felt heavier than I expected. "I'd probably miss the noise at first," I admitted. "But eventually I'd learn to love the quiet." Grace nodded slowly. "You already do." That afternoon, a courier arrived with another envelope, this one marked urgent. It was addressed to Zayla Weaver, Managing Director, the Rowan House Hotel. I opened it carefully. Inside was a formal invitation. "You are cordially invited to the engagement party of Elise Weaver and Chase Dalton." No RSVP, no pleasantries, just the date, the location, and at the bottom in small print, "Event partner, the Rowan House Hotel." My first instinct was disbelief. Then a strange calm settled over me. Elise hadn't even bothered hiding the audacity anymore. Grace walked in just as I set the paper down. "You saw it." "Yes. Do you want me to deny it publicly?" "Not yet." She looked puzzled. "You're not going to stop her." I leaned back in my chair. "I'm going to let her finish the rope she's tying around her own neck." Grace studied me for a moment. "You've changed," she said quietly. "I finally realized peace doesn't come from avoiding storms. It comes from knowing you can walk through one without flinching." She smiled faintly. "Then I guess it's about to rain again." Later that night, I returned to the rooftop. The wind was colder than usual, sharper. I pulled my coat tighter and looked out over the city. Below, the harbor lights flickered in rhythm with the tide. Somewhere out there, Elise was planning her next performance, rehearsing smiles, rehearsing lies. I wasn't angry anymore, just detached, like watching a storm approach from a safe distance. Inside, the elevator chimed softly. I turned and saw Grace holding a folder. "This just came from PR," she said. "The online reaction to Elise's last post, it's starting to turn." "Turn how?" "People are noticing the inconsistencies. Some commenters mentioned that her events look suspiciously connected to your hotel without official statements. A few even called it unethical." I took the folder, skimming through the screenshots. The comments glowed like embers of truth in a sea of noise. "She's using her sister's name for clout." "The hotel never posted anything. Maybe she's lying." "Monitoring it," I said. "Don't respond. Silence is stronger than defense." Grace nodded. "Understood." When she left, I stood alone again, the city stretching endlessly below. The reflection of my own face in the glass looked steady, but beneath it I felt the flicker of something else, anticipation. This was more than family drama now. This was momentum. Every lie Elise told was fuel. Every attempt to use my name built evidence for the reckoning to come. And when it came, it wouldn't be loud. It would be quiet, precise, final. I closed my eyes and breathed in the cold night air. The sea murmured in the distance, a low and constant rhythm. I thought of the word Grace had used earlier, detective. Maybe that's what I had become. Not a victim, not a sister, but a collector of truths. When I opened my eyes again, the horizon was fading into dawn. The first hint of light touched the rooftops, turning the glass buildings into mirrors. My reflection shimmered across every surface, multiplying endlessly. For once, I didn't look away, because this was no longer a story about being seen. It was a story about finally seeing myself. The morning sunlight filtered through the high windows of my office, soft and almost too gentle for what the day would become. I was reviewing the quarterly budget when Grace knocked once and entered, her expression unreadable. She carried her tablet pressed against her chest as if it were something dangerous. "You need to see this," she said. I gestured for her to hand it over. On the screen was Elise's latest post. My breath caught as I read the caption. "Some people build empires, others build walls. I prefer light, family success truth." The photo showed her leaning on the terrace railing of the Rowan house, framed perfectly with the hotel logo glowing behind her. I scrolled down. The comments came in waves. Her sister must be proud. So inspiring, keeping it all in the family. And then, wait, isn't that hotel under her name too? "She's using the brand," Grace said quietly, tagging it in every post, implying sponsorship. I set the tablet on the desk and exhaled through my nose. How many views? 200,000 and climbing. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling for a long time. "She's not even subtle anymore." Grace hesitated before saying, "There's more. She went live an hour ago." I looked at her. "Show me." Grace opened the recorded stream. Elise sat in a glossy white chair, hair curled, makeup glowing, every movement rehearsed. The background looked like a studio too perfect to be real. She smiled into the camera. "Good morning, everyone. I know there's been gossip about the London event. Let me clear things up. My sister and I are closer than ever. She's helping me with this new project. It's all love." The comments filled the screen instantly. Hearts, emojis, words like "sisters' goals," and "we stand supportive queens." Grace paused the video. "Do you want me to report it?" "No," I said softly. "Let her talk." Grace frowned. "Why?" "Because every word she says is another piece of evidence." She studied my face, maybe looking for anger, but there wasn't any left. There was only focus. By lunchtime, my phone was full of messages, friends, investors, journalists asking for confirmation. "Are you two collaborating? Is it true the hotel is backing her brand?" Even the board members had questions. I spent the entire afternoon clarifying, reassuring, cleaning up the mess she'd made with a few carefully crafted lies. When the sun began to set, I found myself standing alone by the window, watching the city darken into gold and gray. My reflection floated on the glass, layered over the skyline like a ghost. For a moment, I wondered if Elise ever thought about what she was doing, or if she had convinced herself it was harmless because it got her attention. Grace came back in with a cup of tea. "You should eat something," she said. I smiled faintly. "You sound like a mother." "Someone has to," she said. "Yours seems busy." I laughed softly, surprised by how bitter it sounded. "Busy keeping the peace, probably." Grace sat across from me. "Do you ever think about cutting them off completely?" "I think about it all the time. And I realize it's harder to cut people out when they've been living rent-free in your mind since childhood." Grace didn't reply. She didn't need to. She understood the kind of exhaustion that comes from being betrayed by people who call it love. That night, after she left, I stayed at my desk long after the building emptied. The lights from the harbor flickered on the surface of the water outside. I opened my laptop and started writing again. Not a list this time. A letter I would never send. "Elise, I used to believe that family meant forgiveness. That love meant giving until there was nothing left to give. But every time I tried to hold this family together, you pulled another thread loose. Maybe I'm writing this because I need to see the words before I can finally let them go. You didn't break me, Elise. You revealed me. You made me realize that silence isn't kindness. It's complicity. And I'm done being complicit in my own humiliation." I saved it in a folder named Drafts. The irony wasn't lost on me. My entire life had been a draft, something waiting for approval that never came. The next morning, the damage deepened. The hotel PR team showed me an email thread from a London magazine. They wanted to feature Elise's partnership with the Rowan house in an upcoming issue. "It's great branding for both of you," they wrote. I almost laughed. "Branding," I said under my breath. "The prettiest word for exploitation." Grace and I spent hours contacting them, clarifying, explaining. Every correction felt like scooping water from a sinking boat with my hands. By mid-afternoon, I was exhausted, my voice hoarse from polite denials. Then my phone rang again. Unknown number. I answered anyway. "Ms. Weaver?" a man's voice asked. "This is Daniel from the London Financial Review. We're running a piece on family-owned enterprises. Can you confirm whether the Rowan House has agreed to fund Ms. Elise Weaver's new brand? No, I said. We have not. Any claim suggesting otherwise is false. Would you like to make an official statement? Yes. Write this down. The Rowan House does not support or endorse any events organized under my sister's name. Any association is unauthorized. Understood, he said. Thank you for clarifying. When the call ended, I realized my hands were shaking, not with fear, but something colder. I had spent years cleaning up their messes, years absorbing blame so they wouldn't have to, but this was different. This was calculated. By the time I left the office, twilight had fallen. I took the long route home, driving through the narrow cobblestone streets near the waterfront. The smell of rain still lingered. My thoughts were louder than the engine. When I reached my apartment, the answering machine was blinking. One new message. I pressed play. Zayla, my mother's voice said. You need to calm down. Elise didn't mean to upset you. She's just young. You should support her instead of fighting her. You two used to be so close. Don't ruin it over something trivial. I closed my eyes, letting the words settle like dust. Trivial, of course. Everything was always trivial until it cost them something. I deleted the message. That night I couldn't sleep. I walked through the apartment restless. The lights from the city outside cast slow-moving shadows across the floor. I stopped in front of the mirror in the hallway. My reflection stared back, hair loose, eyes tired but alert. For the first time, I didn't pity the woman I saw. I admired her. Because she was still standing. The next morning, I decided to act. Not emotionally, not impulsively, but precisely. I called Grace as soon as I reached the office. Start gathering everything, I told her. Contracts, messages, posts, invoices, everything tied to Elise. She didn't ask why. On it, she said. By noon, she had 3 folders stacked neatly on my desk. You're planning something, she said. I'm planning to stop being the story's victim. What are you going to do? Hold her accountable. Grace gave a small, approving nod. Then let's make it airtight. That afternoon, I reached out to my legal team again. This time, my message was short and clear. Initiate formal notice of unauthorized use of brand identity. Subject, Elise Weaver, effective immediately. When I hit send, the knot in my chest loosened. At 6, I received another call, Elise this time. Her voice was all sugar and steel. You're overreacting, Zayla. Everyone's talking about us. It's good publicity. Don't ruin it with paperwork. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the window. You lied about a partnership. You used my name to fund your vanity projects. That's fraud, Elise. Oh, please, it's family. Family doesn't forge signatures. There was silence on the other end. Then she laughed softly. You wouldn't dare make this public. It'll make you look heartless. Maybe, I said, or maybe it'll finally make me look human. Before she could respond, I hung up. I sat there for a while, listening to the low hum of the air conditioning, the faint sounds of the city outside. And then, without thinking, I whispered to myself, it begins. Because somewhere deep down, I knew that this was the real starting point, not the humiliation, not the silence, but this moment of clarity. This was the moment the story shifted from survival to control, and I was ready. The next day began with silence, the kind that felt deliberate, like the world was holding its breath. The sky outside the hotel was pale gray, the color of uncertainty. For the first time in weeks, I didn't rush to check my phone. I made coffee, stood by the window, and watched the mist roll in from the harbor. It looked like the city itself was trying to disappear. But peace never lasts long when your name is currency. Grace came in without knocking. She looked composed, but the tension in her jaw betrayed her. You might want to sit down, she said. I'm already sitting. She placed her tablet on the desk. She went live again, it's trending on Twitter. I took the tablet. On the screen was Elise, sitting on a couch surrounded by candles and designer boxes, her voice soft, her eyes carefully glistening with controlled tears. I never wanted things to be ugly, she said to her millions of followers. But my sister has always made me feel small. I've tried to make peace, but she only sees money, not love. She sniffed delicately. I hope she finds happiness, even if it's without me. The comment section was a battlefield of opinions. Poor Elise, she's just trying to build her life. That sister sounds toxic. Classic jealous sibling energy. And one that cut deeper than the rest. Imagine being rich and still bitter. Grace's voice broke through the static. She's painting you as the villain. I know. You can't just ignore this, Zayla. The longer it sits, the more people believe it. I leaned back slowly, staring at the ceiling. You remember what you told me once, that silence can be power. I did, she said carefully, but silence can also look like guilt. I'm not ready to speak, not yet. Grace sighed but didn't argue. She knew me well enough to trust that my quiet had a direction. After she left, I replayed the live stream again. The performance was flawless. Elise's pauses, her trembling hands, the perfect camera angle that caught her reflection in a nearby mirror. It wasn't just manipulation, it was art. But art leaves evidence. That afternoon, I called Daniel from the London Financial Review, the same journalist I'd spoken to days earlier. "Daniel," I said, "I have a story for you." He sounded surprised. "About your sister?" "Yes, about what it means to be used by family and called selfish for saying no." He hesitated. "You want to go on record?" "No, not yet. I want you to watch. In a week, you'll see everything you need to see. Then you can decide if the story writes itself." He didn't press. Good journalists rarely do. By evening, Grace came into my office again. "Legal sent the draft notice," she said. "You just need to sign." I took the document. The paper was crisp, the ink freshly printed. Notice of unauthorized use of name and brand identity. The words looked sterile, but to me, they felt like blood. Mine finally stopped from being drained. I signed it. The pen didn't shake. "Send it," I said. Grace nodded, slipping the document back into the folder. "Effective immediately." I looked out the window. Effective finally. The next morning, the world responded exactly as expected. Elise's team must have received the notice overnight. She posted again, this time less composed. Her tone was defensive, her smile tighter. "I can't believe my own sister would threaten legal action over something that was supposed to be love," she said. "But if that's how she wants it, so be it." Her followers erupted again, but this time, something shifted. A few began to question her sincerity. Someone commented, "Didn't she say they were working together? Now she's pretending she didn't use the hotel's name?" Another wrote, "Something's off. Real sisters don't keep posting about each other for clout." The tide was turning, slowly but perceptibly. Grace appeared in my doorway later that day. "PR wants to know if we should respond publicly." "No statements," I said. "No press conferences, just facts." "Facts, yes. Schedule an interview with the Tribune next week, but not about her, about the hotel's 10th anniversary. Let them see who I am without me having to say who she is." Grace smiled slightly. "That's a smart move. It's the only kind worth making." That night, I stayed late again. The building was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every sound louder. I walked through the ballroom, the same place where the first humiliation had happened, and turned on the lights. The golden glow spilled over the mirrors, reflecting endless versions of me. I walked closer to one and touched the glass. For months, I'd been collecting evidence like weapons. But standing there, I realized evidence wasn't what I wanted. Closure was, I wanted to stop caring. I wanted her name to stop burning holes through my thoughts. The door opened softly behind me. Grace stepped in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You're still here." "So are you," she smiled. "I figured you might need company." She handed me the cup. "It's decaf. Don't worry, I'm not trying to kill you." I laughed quietly. "You'd be the first person today who is." We stood side by side, looking into the mirror. "Funny," she said, "how people think mirrors tell the truth, but really they just repeat what they're given." "Like family," I said, "exactly like family." We sipped in silence for a while, then Grace asked, "What happens next?" "I wait," I said. "Let the truth surface on its own. And if it does, I'll make sure it does." When she left, I stayed there for another hour, tracing the reflections until they blurred. Each version of me looked a little different, some tired, some defiant, some still hopeful. I wondered which one was real. Maybe all of them, maybe none. At midnight, I checked my email one last time before leaving. Among the usual messages, one stood out, from Elise Weaver. Subject, "You'll regret this." The body of the email was short. "You can't hide behind contracts forever. People love me, Zayla, they always will. And when they stop loving you, don't come crying to me." I stared at the screen for a long moment, then clicked archive. The next morning, I woke to a different kind of noise. My phone was vibrating nonstop. Grace's name appeared on the screen. "Turn on the news," she said the moment I answered. I grabbed the remote and switched on the television. A headline flashed across the bottom: "Social media star Elise Weaver under investigation for forged sponsorships." My heart didn't race, my breath didn't catch, I just watched. Grace's voice came through the line, steady but shaken. "Someone leaked the documents, the ones from Aria Sky Lounge, the forged signature." I didn't move. The screen showed Elise's face, her perfect expression faltering under the camera lights, reporters shouting questions, her assistant blocking microphones. "They're calling it a potential case of fraud," Grace said. "I know. Did you leak it?" "No," she paused. "Then who did?" "I don't know." Maybe karma finally decided to work overtime. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said quietly, "You realize what this means?" "Yes," I said. "It means I don't have to fight anymore." I turned off the TV. The room went quiet again. Through the window, the first light of morning touched the city, golden and fragile. I felt something deep inside me shift, like a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying finally dropped to the floor. The phone buzzed once more. A message from Daniel, the journalist. "You were right, the story wrote itself." I smiled, not because I'd won, but because I'd finally stopped losing. Outside, the sea was calm, reflecting the sky like glass. For the first time in years, the reflection didn't feel like a trap. It felt like proof that I was still here. The day after Elise's scandal broke, the hotel lobby felt unusually bright, as if the world outside had decided to forgive the weather for once. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, scattering across the marble floor in soft gold patterns. People were talking about her everywhere, at the cafe near the harbor, on the radio, even in the quiet murmurs that slipped through the hotel corridors. Every few hours, someone sent me another link. Headlines in bold fonts, "Influencer under fire for forged sponsorships." Socialite Elise Weaver faces legal questions over fraud allegations. Sister of luxury hotel owner in hot water. For a while, I didn't open any of them. I'd spent too many years letting Elise dictate my emotions. But now, the noise was hers to manage. I wanted silence, not revenge. Grace entered my office carrying 2 coffees. She set one down in front of me. "You're officially trending for the right reasons this time," she said. "I didn't do anything." "Exactly," she said. "Sometimes doing nothing is the loudest thing you can do." I smiled faintly, but my chest still felt tight. "Any statements from her?" "She's been quiet since the investigation started," Grace said, "but her fiancé deleted all their photos together. That's telling." I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window. "She'll spin it somehow, she always does." "Maybe," Grace said, "but not everyone believes her anymore." She placed a folder on my desk, financial updates, property reports, contracts, all the little things that kept my world from collapsing. For years, I'd thought managing numbers was easier than managing people. Numbers stayed loyal. They didn't lie or cry or beg. After Grace left, I took a deep breath and opened the next document on my screen. I wanted to focus on the expansion project, not the storm outside, but halfway through, my intercom buzzed. "Ms. Weaver," the front desk manager said, "there's someone asking to see you." "Who?" "Mrs. Lorraine Weaver." My hand froze over the keyboard, my mother. "Send her up," I said. When she walked into my office, it was like the temperature dropped. She looked smaller than usual, her usual poise replaced by something brittle. She was holding a white box in one hand. "Zayla," she said softly, "you look well." "Do I?" She hesitated, then stepped forward and placed the box on my desk. "I brought you cake, your favorite banana walnut." I stared at it. "You came all this way for that." Her lips trembled into a practiced smile. "It used to make you happy. I thought maybe it still would." I didn't touch the box. "What do you want, Mother?" She sat down without asking, smoothing the fabric of her dress. "It's about Elise." "Of course it is." "She's devastated, Zayla. The press is tearing her apart. People are calling her names, saying awful things online. She's barely sleeping." "She'll recover," I said flatly. "She could go to prison." She should have thought of that before forging signatures. Her voice trembled. "You don't understand. She's fragile, always has been. I'm asking you to help her, please." "Help her how?" "By lying for her again." "Just talk to your lawyers. Tell them it was a misunderstanding, a family mix-up." I stood slowly. "A misunderstanding?" I repeated. "She used my name to steal money. That's not a misunderstanding, that's theft." "She didn't mean to. She never means to," I said. "That's the problem. She does terrible things, then hides behind your pity." Her eyes filled with tears. "She's your sister. She's a grown woman who made her choices. You used to protect her." "I used to think she was worth protecting." The silence that followed was sharp, brittle. For the first time, I saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the cracks beneath the perfect skin, the years of denial she'd worn like jewelry. She reached for the box on the desk and pushed it toward me again. "At least take this." I looked at it for a long time, then opened the small fridge beside my desk, placed the box inside the freezer, and closed the door. She stared at me, confused. "Why did you do that?" "'Cause cold things don't spoil." Her lips parted, but no words came. "I don't want sweetness from people who hand me poison afterward," I said quietly. "If you came here to beg, you've wasted your trip." Her composure cracked. "You've become cruel." "No," I said, "I've become accurate." She stood up, straightened her coat, and said, "I hope you can live with yourself when this family falls apart." I smiled faintly. "It fell apart a long time ago. You just never looked down to see the pieces." She left without another word. The faint scent of her perfume lingered in the air, something floral, expensive, and suffocating. I sat down again and stared at the closed freezer. The box inside was still visible through the frosted glass. For some reason, I couldn't look away. It sat there perfectly still, preserved. A part of me felt like that cake kept in a cold space just to survive. When Grace came back in later, she noticed my expression. "What happened?" "Family visit," she grimaced. "How bad?" "Standard," she hesitated. "Want to talk about it?" "No," I said softly. "Talking gives it life." Grace nodded. "Then let's focus on something alive." She handed me a folder. "Quarterly performance report, we're up 12%. That number should have made me happy. It didn't. It just made me realize how much emotion I'd lost to arithmetic survival. The rest of the day passed in quiet efficiency. Emails, contracts, scheduled meetings, all routine. But my mind kept drifting back to that white box, to my mother's trembling hands, to the way she used guilt like a lullaby. As evening fell, I locked my office and took the long route home through the service corridor. The halls were dim, the sound of my footsteps echoing softly against the tiles. When I passed the freezer room where desserts were stored, I stopped. Rows of cakes, parfaits, and pastries lined the metal shelves. Cold, perfect, motionless. I thought of my mother's words, "She's your sister." And then I whispered to the empty room, "Not anymore." That night, I couldn't shake the chill from my body. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying her visit over and over. For the first time, I wondered if maybe the frozen cake wasn't a metaphor for them, but for me. Maybe I'd been preserving myself in coldness just to stay intact, but warmth without boundaries was what destroyed me before. When I finally drifted into sleep, I dreamed of mirrors. Endless mirrors stretching into the dark, each one holding a reflection of me at different ages: child, teenager, woman. In each one, I was holding something: a box, a contract, a letter. In the last mirror, I was holding a key. When I woke up, the room was filled with pale morning light. I didn't know what the dream meant, but I knew what I had to do. I got dressed, drove to the hotel, and told Grace to schedule a private meeting with my lawyer that afternoon. "Something happened?" she asked. "Something ended," I said. "That's enough of a reason to begin." By noon, I was sitting across from my lawyer in a quiet office overlooking the river. He was an older man, gray-haired, calm, the kind of person who never wasted words. "You want to press charges?" he asked. "Not yet," I said, "but I want every possible legal line drawn. If anyone from that family uses my name, my company, or my assets again, I want the law to speak before I do." He nodded, writing something in his notebook. "Understood." I looked out the window, watching the water ripple beneath the bridge. "This isn't about revenge," I said quietly. "It's about boundaries." He smiled faintly. "Boundaries are what keep empires from burning." As I left his office, I felt lighter than I had in months. Maybe this was what real power looked like: not shouting, not winning arguments, but knowing when to shut a door and never open it again. When I returned to the hotel that evening, the freezer in my office hummed quietly. I opened it, looked at the frozen cake, and finally took it out. I carried it to the balcony overlooking the harbor. The wind was sharp, almost playful. I lifted the lid, let the cold air kiss my face, and then tipped the box gently. The cake slid out and fell into the dark water below. It broke apart on the surface, tiny crumbs swallowed by the tide. Grace stepped out behind me just in time to see it. "Throwing something away?" "Just leftovers," I said. She looked at me for a long moment, then smiled. "Good. It's time to make room for something fresh." We stood there in silence as the sun dipped below the skyline. For the first time, the horizon didn't look distant. It looked reachable. The next morning, the sea mist rolled in thick over the harbor, turning the glass facade of the Rowan house into a pale ghost of itself. The city was waking slowly beneath a sheet of gray, but inside my office, everything was still. The air smelled faintly of coffee and lilies. I stood by the window, watching droplets slide down the glass, each one carving a fragile path toward the sill. They reminded me of time, tiny, unstoppable movements that eventually rewrite everything. Grace entered quietly, carrying her tablet. "Your mother called again," she said. "Let it go to voicemail." She also sent flowers. Twice. I smiled without looking away from the window. Persistent woman. She left a note this time. Grace held out a small white envelope. I hesitated before taking it. Inside, in her elegant handwriting, were the words, "Family isn't about perfection, it's about forgiveness. Don't let the world see us divided." I read it twice before folding it neatly and setting it on the desk. She never runs out of performances. Grace studied me. "You okay?" "I'm not sad," I said. "I'm just tired of being her favorite redemption project." Grace nodded softly. "Then maybe it's time to stop giving her scenes to act in." "I already have." I turned back to the window. The hotel stood tall in the reflection, its mirrored walls gleaming faintly through the fog. For a second, I imagined what it would look like to a stranger: beautiful, flawless, untouchable. They wouldn't see the cracks behind the walls. They never did. At noon, I walked down to the kitchen. The staff were busy preparing for an afternoon wedding, trays of pastries, rows of wine glasses, floral arrangements. Everything moved with perfect rhythm. Seeing them reminded me why I'd built this place, not for recognition, but for control, for stability, for something I could keep standing when everything else fell apart. I stopped beside the pastry counter, where one of the younger chefs was icing a cake. She looked up, startled. "Ms. Weaver, I didn't see you there." "It looks beautiful," I said. "Thank you, it's for the Chambers' wedding tonight." She hesitated, then added, "Your family must be proud of you, owning all this." I smiled faintly. "They notice it more when it's convenient." She looked confused but said nothing. I watched her spread the icing, smooth, careful, methodical. There was something almost healing about it, a quiet kind of creation. When I returned to my office, Grace was waiting with a new folder. "You should see this," she said. It was a letter from Elise's legal representative. The language was formal, but the message was simple. Elise wishes to resolve all disputes privately. She asks that you refrain from further action in exchange for public silence on both sides. Grace folded her arms. "What do you think?" I ran my finger along the edge of the paper. "It's not remorse, it's damage control." "Are you going to respond?" "Eventually," I said. "But not yet." Grace hesitated. "Do you want to know how she's holding up?" "No," I said, though a small part of me did. Grace waited, then said quietly, "She's been staying at her fiancé's apartment, but the media won't leave her alone. They've started following her. She's not posting anymore." I looked out the window again. The fog had thinned, revealing the shimmering outline of the sea. "Every lie has a price," I said softly. She finally got the bill. Grace didn't reply. By afternoon, the hotel was buzzing with the energy of the wedding. Music drifted faintly up to my office, strings, laughter, the clinking of champagne flutes. The sound felt foreign, like something that belonged to another life. I tried to work, but my mind kept circling back to that letter on the desk. It wasn't the words that bothered me, it was the handwriting. Elegant, calculated, a little too familiar. It was the same tone Elise used when she wanted something, but pretended it was a gift. I opened my laptop and drafted a reply. To Law Offices of J. Benton subject. Regarding settlement proposal, dear Mr. Benton, I appreciate your client's offer to resolve matters privately. However, I do not accept silence as currency. Accountability is not a negotiation. Until Ms. Weaver acknowledges the full extent of her actions, this remains a matter for legal evaluation. Respectfully, Zayla Weaver. I read it 3 times, then pressed send. My hands didn't shake. Later that evening, I stepped out onto the balcony again. The sun was setting, spilling orange light across the harbor. For the first time, the city looked quiet, not because it was peaceful, but because I finally was. Grace joined me holding 2 glasses of wine. "Wedding, going well," she said. "They just cut the cake." "Good," I said. "Let someone else have a perfect night." She handed me a glass. "You should eat something, you haven't all day." "I'm fine." She leaned against the railing beside me. "You've been holding everything together for so long, Zayla. You can breathe now." "I am breathing." "Then maybe start living again too." I looked at her, really looked. The way the sunset softened her face, the steadiness in her eyes. Grace had been beside me through the quietest and loudest storms, never asking for more than honesty. "What would living look like?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "Whatever doesn't look like surviving." We stood there in silence, watching the last of the sunlight fade. When I finally went home that night, the air felt warmer. I poured myself a drink and sat by the window, the city lights blinking like tiny stars below. My phone buzzed once, a new message from an unknown number. "I'm sorry." No name, but I didn't need one. I stared at the words, waiting for some familiar rush of emotion, anger, sadness, pity, but there was nothing. Just calm. I typed back slowly. "I hope you mean it." No response came. I set the phone down and let the silence fill the room. Outside, the moonlight shimmered on the water, breaking into silver fragments. For years, I thought strength meant keeping everything intact, but maybe real strength was knowing what to let fall apart. The next morning, I walked into the hotel feeling lighter. Grace greeted me at the front desk with a rare smile. "Big news," she said. "The investigation's wrapping up, no charges against you, and the press is moving on to something new." "Good," I said. "Let them forget me." "They won't," she said softly. "Not after how you handled it." Maybe she was right, but I didn't need to be remembered. I just needed to stop being misunderstood. Later that day, I opened the freezer in my office one last time. It was empty, the space where the cake had been now filled only with frost. I ran my fingers along the cool metal, then closed the door gently. Some stories end not with explosions, but with a quiet click. When I turned back to my desk, Grace was standing in the doorway, holding a new file. The London investor wants to meet next week, she said. They're interested in expanding the brand internationally. I smiled. Let's do it. She tilted her head. You sure you're ready? I've been ready for years, I said. I just needed to stop waiting for permission. She nodded, a smile flickering at the corner of her lips. Welcome back, boss. As the door closed behind her, I looked at the faint reflection of myself in the window. The city stretched endlessly beyond it, alive, indifferent, full of possibility. For the first time, I wasn't looking for approval in that reflection. I was looking at a woman who had walked through fire, frost, and silence, and was still standing. And that was enough. The night of the gala began with the kind of silence that felt like the world inhaling before it shatters. From the balcony of my office, I could see the ballroom glowing below, a cascade of lights, music, and movement. People were arriving in black cars, their laughter spilling into the marble foyer. It was supposed to be another event hosted by a luxury travel company, but I already knew who was behind it. Elise. She had managed to find a loophole, or so she thought. After weeks of silence, she had resurfaced online with a new announcement. A celebration of resilience, beauty, and rebirth, hosted at the Rowan House. No sponsor tags, no forged documents this time, just an unnamed collaborator. The world had assumed it was me. Grace stood beside me holding a clipboard, her expression unreadable. She's bold, I'll give her that. She's desperate, I said quietly. She booked the space through an event agency under a different name, Grace added. Technically, it's legal. She paid in full. Of course she did. When she can't take, she performs. Grace glanced at me. Are you going down there? Yes, she hesitated. You don't have to prove anything, Zayla. Not anymore. I'm not proving anything. I'm ending it. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. My reflection flickered across the mirrored walls, multiplied into an army of silent versions of myself, calm, composed, waiting. When the doors opened, the sound of music spilled in, layered with laughter and clinking glasses. The ballroom looked almost unreal. Hundreds of candles floated above mirrored tables, their flames reflected endlessly in the glass panels lining the walls. Every surface shimmered with soft gold. People turned as I entered, and for a moment the room seemed to breathe differently. Elise stood at the center of it all. She wore a silver gown that caught the light like liquid. Her hair was pinned back, a diamond glinting at her throat. When she saw me, her smile faltered, then returned sharper. Zayla, she said, voice carrying across the crowd. You came. I own the building, I said. I make it a habit to visit when something important happens. Laughter rippled through the guests, uncertain, nervous. Elise's smile didn't waver. It's good to see you out. I was worried you'd become allergic to social events. Only to parasites, I replied. The silence that followed was clean, sudden, and perfect. Grace would later tell me that the moment felt like someone had cut the music with a knife. Elise's hand tightened around her glass, but she recovered quickly. You always had a way with words. And you always had a way with lies, I said softly. The guests shifted, whispering. Someone's phone camera flickered. Elise's voice was a careful whisper of calm. This isn't the time or place, sister, I smiled. You made sure of that, but unfortunately for you, it's the perfect time and the right place. She blinked. What are you talking about? I turned toward the nearest table where a projector had been set up to display her brand video. The event staff were already preparing it to play. Go ahead, I said to the technician. Start it. He hesitated but obeyed. The lights dimmed. The first few seconds of the video flashed across the mirrored walls, smiling faces, champagne towers, Elise waving at a camera, and then the screen glitched. The next image wasn't part of her video. It was a scanned contract, the same forged one that started everything. Her name, my forged signature, date, stamp, transaction logs. Then came screenshots of the emails she'd sent pretending to be me. Gasps filled the room. Phones came up like a forest of small lights. Elise turned toward me, her face drained of color. What did you do? Nothing, I said. You did this, I just kept records. The projection changed again. A clip from her live stream, the one where she'd cried, claiming I'd abandoned her. Side by side, another video, her own assistant admitting the truth in a private message that Grace had preserved. She made me forge the signature. I didn't know it'd go that far. The final slide appeared, a legal notice stamped and dated, showing the case closure, all charges dropped against me, all further investigations pending for Elise. The lights came back on. Elise stood frozen, her eyes wide and shining with shock. Around her, the guests shifted uneasily. Cameras flashed. Someone whispered, "That's her sister." I took a slow breath and stepped forward. My voice was calm, steady, almost kind. For years, I believed silence protected us. I was wrong. Silence only protects the wrong people. Her lips trembled. You planned this? No, I said. You did. I turned to the crowd. Enjoy your evening, drinks are on the house. But the host, I looked back at Elise, then I walked away. The music didn't start again. It couldn't. In the hallway, Grace was waiting, her expression unreadable. You sure you wanted to do that publicly? She turned my life into theater, I said. I just returned the script. She'll come after you, Grace warned. She already did, I just stopped pretending to bleed. We rode the elevator in silence. I could feel my heartbeat slow, returning to something steady and almost peaceful. When the doors opened on the top floor, the world below looked smaller, the city, the lights, the chaos, all distant now. Grace handed me her phone. The news is already spreading. They're calling it the Mirror Room Meltdown. I looked at the headline. A strange sense of relief washed over me. Fitting name. You're not worried. No, I said, because for the first time the reflection matched the truth. That night, I sat alone in my office with a glass of wine. The faint hum of the building surrounded me, the air system, the sound of rain beginning again against the windows. I thought I'd feel triumphant, but what I felt instead was quiet. Heavy, calm quiet. I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app. For months, I'd been keeping a private file titled Lessons. I added a new line. Lesson 19, when you show people their reflection, don't expect them to thank you for the mirror. Then I turned off the phone and let the darkness return. Outside, the last guests were leaving. The ballroom lights dimmed one by one. I could almost hear the echo of the music that had stopped too soon, the hollow applause that no one dared to continue. And somewhere, beneath all that silence, I could feel the faintest hum of freedom. It wasn't victory. It wasn't revenge. It was something quieter, something final. The next morning, the city woke up before I did. News of what happened at the gala spread like perfume spilled on marble, impossible to contain, impossible to ignore. Every local paper had a version of the story. Sisters showdown at the Rowan house. Socialite, event ends in scandal. Some outlets were almost sympathetic, others gleefully cruel. But I didn't read any of them. I didn't need to. I already knew how the story went. When I walked into the lobby of the hotel, everything looked the same as always, guests checking in, luggage rolling across polished floors, coffee brewing behind the cafe counter. But something was different in the air. The staff didn't look at me with quiet pity anymore. They looked at me with something else, respect, maybe even pride. Grace was waiting at the reception desk, holding her tablet as always. You're officially trending worldwide, she said. I told you I'm not reading any of it. You don't have to, I can summarize. I raised an eyebrow. Go ahead. They're calling you the woman who broke the silence. A few feminist blogs are praising you for standing up to public humiliation. The financial press is focusing on your management, how you turned a scandal into a rebranding opportunity for the hotel. And then there's Elise. I waited. She hasn't been seen since last night. Her accounts are locked, and her PR team resigned this morning. I nodded slowly, taking it all in. So she's gone quiet, for now. I turned toward the glass doors where the sunlight was spilling across the floor like gold ribbons. Let's hope it stays that way. Grace hesitated. Do you feel better? Better implies I was sick, I said. Let's just say I can breathe. She smiled faintly. I'll take that as progress. By afternoon, the media requests began pouring in talk shows, podcasts, magazines. Everyone wanted the same thing, the inside story. They wanted emotion. They wanted confession. But I wasn't interested in giving them either. I drafted one simple statement. The Rowan House stands for integrity, transparency, and resilience. This incident, while unfortunate, has reaffirmed our values. No drama, no gossip, just control. Grace read it and nodded. Perfect. Cold but classy. That's the brand, I said. Later, I walked through the empty ballroom again. The scent of roses and perfume still hung faintly in the air. The mirrors were spotless, as if last night had never happened, but I knew better. The reflections remembered everything. I stood before the largest mirror, the one facing the grand staircase, and studied my reflection. There she was, the woman who had finally said no after a lifetime of yes. Her expression was calm, unflinching. For the first time, I didn't look like someone holding her breath. I touched the glass lightly, feeling its cool surface. We made it, I whispered. In that moment, the reflection didn't feel separate. It felt like an acknowledgement. Grace's voice came from behind me. The investors from London confirmed they're still interested in the international expansion. They said last night showed strength. Good, I said. Schedule a call next week. Already did. She paused, then added, You know, it's strange. All those years you stayed quiet, people saw you as cold. But the minute you spoke, they finally saw your heart. I smiled faintly. People always mistake quiet for absence. The rest of the week passed in a strange rhythm, half work, half reflection. The hotel was busier than ever. Guests came just to see the place that had hosted the confrontation. Photographers took pictures of the staircase where Elise had stood. Someone even offered to rent the ballroom for a truth-themed fashion show. Grace rolled her eyes when she told me, "You're becoming a symbol, you know." "I'd rather be a warning," I said. "Then you've succeeded at both." By Friday, an official letter arrived from Elise's lawyer. The language was formal, but the meaning was clear. She was withdrawing all public statements and issuing a private apology. Attached was a scanned note, written in her own handwriting. "Zayla, I don't expect you to forgive me. Maybe I don't even deserve to ask. I just want you to know that I finally understand what you've been carrying all these years. You were right. Silence only protects the wrong people. I'm sorry, Elise." I read it twice, then placed it in my drawer. I didn't feel vindicated or angry, just tired. Grace came in while I was still holding the paper. "What is it?" "Closure," I said, "or the closest thing to it." She tilted her head. "You're not going to reply?" "No, some things don't need responses, they just need endings." That night, I hosted a small private dinner for the staff, a thank you for standing by me through the chaos. The restaurant lights were dim, the laughter genuine. For once, I didn't feel like I had to perform. Grace raised her glass. "To surviving your own story," I smiled, "to finally rewriting it." When the dinner ended, I went back to my office one last time. The building was quiet, the air cool and still. I walked to the mirror wall again, standing in the same spot I had the night before. In the reflection, I saw everything that had brought me here: the humiliations, the cold dinners, the frozen cakes, the forged papers. Every scar had been part of the design, but there was something new in the reflection now, a softness, a peace that didn't need to be earned. I sat down at my desk and opened my journal, the one I'd been writing in since the beginning. I flipped to a blank page and wrote, "I used to think my reflection was a reminder of who I'd lost. Now I see it's proof of who I became." I closed the journal and turned off the lights. As I walked out, I glanced one last time at the mirrors. They caught the faint glow from the hallway and reflected it endlessly, like 100 small suns burning quietly in the dark. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel haunted by them. I felt at home. The night after the dinner, I stayed later than usual. The hotel was asleep, wrapped in a hush so complete it felt sacred. The lamps in the lobby cast soft amber halos on the marble, and somewhere beyond the glass doors, the sound of the sea echoed like memory itself, steady, persistent, patient. I sat in my office with the window open just enough to let the air in. The scent of salt mixed with paper and coffee. It was peaceful in a way that felt unfamiliar, almost fragile. My phone lay face down on the desk. For hours, it had been buzzing with messages, but I didn't touch it. I just watched the steam from my tea curl and fade in the air. Then, sometime past midnight, it rang. The sound sliced through the quiet. I looked at the screen, my father. I stared at his name for a long time before I answered. "Zayla," he said, voice thick with weariness. "We need to talk." "Do we? I've been trying to call you for days." "I know," he sighed. "Your mother told me what happened. You humiliated your sister in front of hundreds of people." I leaned back in my chair. "She forged my signature, stole my name, and tried to rebuild her career on my company's reputation. I showed the truth. If truth is humiliation, then maybe she should have lived differently." "You always have to have the last word, don't you?" he said quietly. "Someone has to, since no one else in this family ever finishes a sentence with honesty." He hesitated. "She's struggling, Zayla. You made her look like a criminal." "She is a criminal. That's your sister." "She's a stranger who happens to share my last name." He exhaled heavily, the sound rough and tired. "You think you're better than us now? That hotel, that success, it's made you arrogant." I laughed softly. "You call it arrogance because you don't recognize what boundaries sound like." There was silence on the other end, the kind that fills a room with everything unspoken. Then he said, "Your mother been crying every night. She's crying because the story broke, not because of what caused it. She's still your mother, and I'm still her daughter, but that doesn't mean I owe her my peace." He didn't speak for a long time. I could hear the faint crackle of static through the line. Finally, he said quietly, "You've become cold, Zayla. I've become consistent. Consistency without compassion is cruelty. Compassion without consequence is chaos," I said. "You taught me that, remember?" He didn't answer. The silence stretched until it was almost unbearable. Then in a voice smaller than I remembered, he said, "You'll regret this one day." I closed my eyes. "Maybe, but at least I'll regret something I chose." The line went dead. For a moment I just sat there, staring at the faint reflection of myself in the window glass. The city lights blurred behind me, soft and distant. Somewhere below, a car horn sounded, a reminder that life outside my walls kept moving. I placed the phone down slowly, face up this time. My reflection trembled faintly in its dark screen. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anger either, just a strange, hollow ache, the quiet that follows when you finally stop waiting to be understood. The next morning, the sky was white and flat, as if it hadn't decided what kind of day it wanted to be. Grace was already at the desk when I arrived, her hair pulled back, her expression unreadable. "You look like you didn't sleep," she said. "I didn't. Family again? Always." She studied me for a moment, then handed me a cup of coffee. "Drink, you look like someone who forgot they have blood." I smiled faintly. "Thank you." We went through the day as if nothing had happened, meetings, emails, a new investor proposal. But the call lingered, a ghost at the edge of every conversation. Around noon, Grace said, "The phones have been quieter today. The press moved on." "Good," I said. "Let them chase something else." But my phone hadn't been quiet. It had been filling up with voicemails. My mother, my father, unknown numbers that probably belonged to reporters or relatives with opinions. I hadn't listened to any of them. By late afternoon, curiosity won. I closed my office door, sat down, and pressed play. The first message was from my mother, her voice trembling. "You've hurt your father, Zayla. You've embarrassed this family. You need to make it right." Delete. The second was shorter. "You're selfish." Delete. The third was from a number I didn't recognize. It was Elise. Her voice was quiet, small. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted to tell you that I understand now. What it feels like when the world laughs. What it feels like when your own family looks at you and sees a problem to fix. I thought I was strong. I was, you were, I'm sorry." I sat there, phone in hand, listening to the silence that followed her words. Grace knocked softly. "Everything okay?" "Fine." "Was that?" "Yes." "Do you believe her?" I looked out the window. The sea shimmered faintly under the pale sun. "I don't know," I said, "but for once it doesn't matter." Grace nodded slowly, as if she understood. "Do you want to save the message?" "No," I said quietly. "Delete it." When she left, I sat for a long time, staring at the phone lying flat on the desk. Then I opened my drawer and took out the folded letter Elise had sent earlier, the apology written in ink, neat and fragile. I unfolded it once more, read the words again, then tore it cleanly in half. The sound was softer than I expected. I dropped the pieces into the bin and whispered, "That's enough." That evening, I walked through the corridors of the hotel again. The staff smiled when they saw me. Guests passed by, unaware of the wars that had been fought within these walls. The air smelled of lavender and polished wood. For the first time, I noticed the details I had stopped seeing, the way the chandelier crystals caught the light like raindrops, the soft music in the lounge, the quiet hum of people simply existing. I had spent so long surviving that I'd forgotten how to observe. In the reflection of a passing mirror, I saw my face tired but serene. My eyes no longer carried the sharpness of defense, only the steadiness of acceptance. I whispered to the reflection, "We made it through the noise." And for the first time, it didn't feel like I was talking to a stranger. When I reached my office again, the phone was ringing. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick it up. "Ms. Weaver," a woman's voice said, "this is Claire from the London Business Journal. We're running a feature on women who rebuild reputations, yours and your hotel's. We'd like to include you." "Send me the questions by email," I said. "Of course, and Ms. Weaver, congratulations." "For what?" "For surviving the storm with grace." I smiled faintly. It wasn't grace, it was practice. When the call ended, I leaned back in my chair. The room was quiet again, the last light of day spilling across the carpet. I realized something then. Peace wasn't the absence of conflict. It was the decision to stop reopening wounds just because they were familiar. The phone stayed silent for the rest of the night. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to fill the silence. The next few days passed like slow-moving waves, quiet, deliberate, and strangely gentle. The chaos had finally burned itself out, leaving behind an unfamiliar stillness that felt almost like healing. Every morning, I came to the hotel before sunrise. The corridors would still be half-lit, the world outside wrapped in the gray hush before dawn. I liked those hours best, when everything was clean, unclaimed, and waiting to be written anew. One morning, Grace found me in the atrium, standing beneath the glass dome, watching the first light filter through. "You're early," she said, her voice soft in the vastness. "I couldn't sleep. You've said that every day this week." I smiled faintly. "Maybe peace makes bad company. I don't know what to do with it yet." She handed me a cup of coffee. "Then start small, drink, walk, breathe. You don't need to build anything for a while. Building is how I breathe." Then maybe it's time you learned another way. Her words lingered long after she left. I sat in the lobby for an hour, watching the sunlight move across the floor, thinking about what it meant to live without crisis. I wasn't used to it. My life had always been structured around fixing something, saving someone, mending something broken, proving something unprovable. Now there was nothing left to fix. It should have felt freeing. It mostly felt strange. By noon, I met with the board for the hotel's expansion proposal. The London investors were eager, almost overly so. They wanted to franchise the Rowan House name across Europe, starting with Paris and Milan. The numbers were tempting: growth projections, profit margins, brand partnerships. But as I listened, something inside me hesitated. When they finished, I said quietly, "If we expand, we lose what made us different. This place isn't just a business, it's an anchor. It was built to be human, not corporate." They looked surprised. One of them asked, "Are you sure you want to turn that down? It's a legacy opportunity." I smiled. Legacy isn't about how far your name spreads, it's about what remains when the name disappears. They didn't argue. They didn't need to. I wasn't seeking approval anymore. After the meeting, I walked to the rooftop terrace. The air was sharp, the horizon stretching endlessly. Below, the city glimmered in late afternoon light, small, alive, indifferent. I leaned against the railing, closed my eyes, and let the wind move through my hair. For the first time, I realized I didn't feel haunted by Elise anymore. Her name didn't taste bitter. Her face didn't flicker behind my eyelids. She had become what she was always meant to be, a chapter, not a chain. When I returned to my office, Grace was waiting. "You turned them down," she said. "I did," she nodded slowly. "It's the first time you've said no to growth. It's the first time I've said yes to myself." She smiled. "I like this version of you." "I do too," I said. That evening, as the staff began closing up, I wandered through the quiet halls again. The mirrors lining the walls caught fragments of movement, flickers of light, glances of my own reflection. But they no longer felt like witnesses. They felt like company. In the corridor outside the ballroom, I stopped. The chandeliers were dimmed, their crystals swaying faintly with the air. I could still remember the night of the gala, the crowd, the silence, the fracture of illusion. But now, standing here, the space felt different. It had forgiven itself. I walked to the center of the room and stood alone. My heels clicked softly on the marble. I whispered, "It's over." And the room didn't echo. It absorbed it. Later that night, I sat on my balcony overlooking the harbor. The sea below shimmered with scattered reflections of the city lights. Somewhere in the distance, a ship horn sounded, a low, steady hum that faded into the wind. I poured a glass of wine and picked up my journal again. The last entry I'd written had ended with "I became." Tonight, I added a new line. "Becoming isn't the end, it's the beginning of stillness." The phone on the table buzzed once. A message from Grace: "Leaving early tomorrow, taking a week off. You should do the same." I smiled. "Maybe I will." I closed the journal, stood, and leaned against the railing. The air was cool against my skin. Somewhere, I could hear faint music drifting from a bar along the pier, something slow and nostalgic. For the first time, I didn't feel like a spectator to my own story. I was just present. The next morning, I packed a small bag, left a note for Grace, and drove out of the city. No destination, just direction. The highway stretched open, gray, and endless, the kind of road that asks nothing except that you keep going. Hours later, I stopped at a small coastal town, white cottages, a bakery, a lighthouse that blinked faintly against the horizon. I booked a room in a quiet inn overlooking the sea. The owner, an older woman with kind eyes, handed me a brass key and said, "The ocean sounds better at night." She was right. I fell asleep with the window open, listening to the waves crash and retreat. Each sound felt like a breath, the world inhaling and exhaling with me. Sometime after midnight, the phone on the bedside table rang. I almost didn't answer, but instinct made me pick it up. "Hello?" There was silence on the other end, then a familiar voice whispered, "Zayla? Elise?" For a moment I couldn't speak. The sound of her voice was softer than I remembered, stripped of performance. "I didn't know where else to call," she said finally. "They took everything. The deals, the sponsors, the apartment. I'm leaving London." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're the only one who'll understand what it's like to lose everything and still be standing." I leaned against the headboard, the sound of the sea folding into her voice. "What do you want, Elise?" "Nothing," she said, "just to say thank you." "For what?" "For showing me who I really was." There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, fragile and uneven. Then the line went dead. I didn't call back. I just sat there, listening to the ocean until dawn broke through the curtains. The next morning, I walked barefoot along the beach. The sand was cool beneath my feet, the waves curling around my ankles with soft insistence. In the distance, gulls cut across the gray sky, their cries sharp and free. I thought about everything that had happened, the lies, the noise, the silence. And for the first time, it all felt like part of the same tide. Some things crash, some things return, and some things simply dissolve, leaving behind nothing but clarity. I turned toward the sea, whispered a quiet goodbye to everything I had carried, and let the wind take it. When I walked back toward the shore, the world felt lighter. And so did I the morning I returned from the coast. The city looked different, not because it had changed, but because I finally saw it without the fog of exhaustion. The skyline stretched clean and sharp against the pale sky, and even the noise of traffic below sounded less like chaos and more like rhythm. The Rowan house stood waiting for me, tall and gleaming as always. For years, it had felt like a fortress, a cage, a monument to endurance. But today, as I walked through its glass doors, it simply felt like a place. Not a wound, not a battlefield, just a place. Grace met me in the lobby, her face breaking into a rare smile. "You actually disappeared," she said. "I needed to remember what silence without fear sounds like." "Did you find it?" "I did," I said. "It's quieter than I expected." Laughed softly. "That's how peace works. It's never loud enough to announce itself." We walked together through the hallways. The staff greeted me warmly, but there was no longer that tentative sympathy in their eyes, only calm recognition. I had survived something, and they knew it. When we reached my office, there was a single letter waiting on the desk. The envelope was unmarked, but the handwriting was unmistakable, elegant, controlled. "Elise." Grace hesitated. "You want me to? I'll read it," I said. She nodded and closed the door behind her. I sat down, exhaled slowly, and opened it. "Zayla, I'm somewhere in the south of France. Don't worry, I'm not starting over, not in the way I used to. I'm working at a vineyard of all things. It's quiet here. There's no audience, no applause, just time, sun, and silence. I think that's what I was missing. I thought success meant being seen. Maybe it means being able to stop looking. I hope you're well. I hope you're free." I think we both learned what mirrors really do. They don't just reflect, they reveal. Elise, I read it twice. There was no bitterness in her words, no manipulation hiding between the lines, just honesty. A kind I'd never seen from her before. I placed the letter back in the envelope and set it inside the drawer, not to revisit later, but simply to keep as proof that endings can also be gentle. When Grace returned, I told her, "She's gone." "Gone where?" "To start again." Quietly. Grace studied me for a long moment. "And how do you feel?" "Relieved," I said. Then, after a pause, "Sad too, not for her, for what we could have been." She nodded. "Some relationships are meant to teach, not last." The rest of the day moved easily. Meetings felt lighter, conversations shorter. My decisions came without hesitation. There was a clarity now that made everything simpler, not easier, but cleaner. In the late afternoon, I walked to the top floor terrace. The city spread beneath me, gold with evening light. I could see the harbor where the cake had once sunk into the dark water, the streets where reporters had once waited. None of it felt heavy anymore. Grace joined me a few minutes later. "You know," she said, "I've been thinking, maybe it's time you took your name off the hotel's front." I turned to her, surprised. "Why would I do that?" "Because it's already yours," she said. "You don't need to brand it anymore. Let it stand on its own." Her words hit me like a soft truth I hadn't been ready to hear. That night, I stayed late, staring at the illuminated sign outside, the golden letters spelling the Rowan House by Zayla Weaver. I thought about what that name had cost me, about how much I'd fought to protect it. Then I opened my laptop and sent a short message to our design team. Subject, rebranding update. Effective next quarter, remove by Zayla Weaver from all signage and materials. The Rowan House will stand as its own name. When I hit send, I felt something inside me finally unclench. The next morning, the PR director came into my office, visibly confused. "Are you sure about this? People associate you with the brand." "That's exactly why I'm doing it," I said. "I don't want this place to be an echo of my survival. I want it to be a beginning." She smiled slowly. "You're not afraid people will forget?" I looked at the reflection of the city behind her. "If they forget, then I did it right." That afternoon, Grace and I walked through the newly renovated suites. The sound of construction had faded, replaced by soft laughter from guests, distant piano notes from the lounge. She looked at me and said, "You've changed." "So have you," I said. She tilted her head. "Are you going to tell me what's next?" "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "For once, I don't have a plan. I might travel, or write, or do nothing at all." "Doing nothing suits you," she said with a grin. As the day faded into twilight, I found myself back in the ballroom. The mirrors were clean again, but faint fingerprints shimmered under the light, remnants of all the people who had stood here, laughed here, performed here. I walked to the center and stood still, surrounded by 1,000 reflections. Each one of me looked calm, unburdened. I spoke softly, not to the mirrors but to the woman inside them. You did it. You didn't win, you didn't lose, you just ended it. And for once, the reflection didn't echo. It smiled back. That evening, I took a cab to the pier. The air was crisp, filled with the sound of distant jazz from a restaurant nearby. The water shimmered with faint gold reflections. I sat on a bench, wrapped my coat tighter, and let myself just exist, without title, without armor, without story. When my phone buzzed, it was a message from Grace. You forgot something in the office. I smiled. What is it? A mirror compact. Small, round, gold. You left it on your desk. Keep it, I texted back. I don't need reflections anymore. She replied with a heart emoji. I looked out at the sea again, the horizon fading into deep violet. For the first time in years, there was no unfinished sentence in my head, no waiting confrontation, no haunting, just stillness. The waves kept folding and unfolding, endless and effortless. And I finally understood, peace isn't something you find. It's something you stop fighting against. The first night after removing my name from the hotel's brand, I slept for 10 uninterrupted hours. No dreams, no sudden wakefulness, just deep, unbroken quiet. It was the kind of sleep that doesn't come from exhaustion, but from release. When I woke, the sunlight had already filled the apartment. I stood for a moment in the middle of the room, letting it touch my face, the warmth pressing against my eyelids. For so long, I had lived in shadows, even my victories had been half-lit. But now, light didn't feel intrusive. It felt deserved. I made breakfast myself, for once not rushing through it, sliced fruit, black coffee, silence. Every motion felt deliberate. Even the small sound of the spoon against porcelain carried a strange calm. I realized that peace was not an event. It was a habit you had to practice. At the office, the new sign had already gone up, the Rowan House. No by Zayla Weaver, no tagline, no flourish, just the name, bold and simple. The staff gathered outside to take a photo, smiling under the morning sky. Grace handed me a printout of the new branding materials. Feels strange, doesn't it? It feels right, I said. We stood side by side, watching as the maintenance team finished polishing the letters. The gold glinted under the sun, clean and unclaimed. Grace smiled. You've finally let the mirrors go. I didn't let them go, I said softly. I just stopped needing them to tell me who I am. Inside, the lobby had been subtly redesigned too. I'd asked the decorators to remove some of the excess glass, replacing it with soft wood, warm light, and plants. For the first time, the space felt alive. Guests walked through not as if they were entering a museum, but a home. An elderly couple paused near the reception desk, admiring the flowers. The woman turned to me, not knowing who I was, and said, "There's something peaceful about this place. Whoever built it must have loved it deeply." I smiled. She did. In the afternoon, Grace and I reviewed the upcoming charity event schedule. Instead of grand galas, I'd chosen something quieter, community initiatives, scholarships for hospitality students, funding for local artists. When I told her my plan, she nodded approvingly. You're redirecting the light. Maybe it's time it shines somewhere else, I said. She hesitated, then said, You've been carrying this story for a long time, Zayla. Don't you think it's time to write something new? I'm already writing it, I said. That evening, I stayed after everyone had left. The hotel hummed with its usual rhythm, the low sound of air conditioning, the faint laughter from the bar downstairs. I wandered through the quiet hallways until I reached the old conference room, the one that had once been used for my first disastrous public presentation years ago. The lights flickered on automatically, revealing a space that had aged gracefully. I walked to the window and looked out at the city below. For a moment, I remembered the woman I had been that day, ambitious, terrified, endlessly striving to prove herself. I almost wanted to reach through time and tell her that she didn't have to earn her worth through wounds. On the table nearby lay a forgotten framed photo of the early days of the hotel, the construction team, the first investors, my younger self standing proudly in a white hard hat. Elise wasn't in it. Neither was my family. I traced the edge of the frame with my finger. It felt like holding the outline of a ghost that no longer hurt to remember. When I left the room, I took the photo with me. Outside, the night air was cool, carrying the scent of rain. I walked down to the harbor and sat on the same bench I had chosen the night of my last conversation with Elise. The waves moved slowly, rhythmic, and patient. Across the water, the lights from the hotel shimmered like constellations. A group of tourists walked past, laughing, taking pictures of the skyline. One of them turned to me and asked, "Excuse me, do you know who owns that beautiful building over there?" I smiled. "No one owns it," I said. "It belongs to itself." They thanked me and walked away, leaving me with the sound of the tide. I leaned back on the bench, eyes closed, listening to the quiet conversation between the sea and the wind. For the first time, I felt the distance between who I was and who I had become, and the distance didn't ache. It just existed, vast and necessary. Later that week, Grace convinced me to attend an art exhibition downtown. "You need to see something that isn't a contract or a spreadsheet," she said. The gallery was small, filled with soft instrumental music and paintings of abstract light. One caught my attention immediately: a large canvas painted entirely in shades of silver and gray, streaked with faint gold lines that seemed to shift as you moved. The artist's note read, "Reflection isn't repetition, it's revelation." I stood there for a long time. Grace whispered beside me, "It reminds me of you." "Why?" "Because you turned your own reflection into something human." I smiled faintly. Maybe that's what all mirrors are supposed to do. After the exhibition, we stopped by a cafe near the pier. Grace asked, "What happens next?" "I don't know," I said. "Maybe nothing, maybe everything." She raised her cup. "To nothing and everything." We laughed, and for once it wasn't a laugh carrying exhaustion or irony. It was light, real, and free. That night I returned home, opened the balcony door, and let the wind fill the room. My phone buzzed once, a message from an unknown number. It read, "I saw your hotel on a travel show. It looked beautiful. I'm proud of you." No signature, but I didn't need one. I set the phone down and whispered, "Goodbye, Elise." Then I turned off the lights, sat by the window, and watched the city's mirrored skyline shimmer softly in the distance. Every reflection, every flicker of gold and glass looked alive, not haunting anymore, but breathing. And in that living reflection, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Myself, not as a survivor, not as a symbol, but as a person. Whole, quiet, complete. I smiled, leaned back, and let the silence hold me like a promise.